On May 5, 2004, a fisherman near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel spotted something heavy floating in the water. He maneuvered his boat closer and retrieved a dark green Kenneth Cole suitcase. Inside, wrapped in black garbage bags, was a pair of human legs. Over the next 11 days, 2 more matching suitcases washed ashore on nearby beaches. The second contained a male torso severed at the waist, the head still attached. The third held the remaining remains. The discovery ignited a grisly mystery that would captivate the nation. The water had destroyed much of the potential forensic evidence, but investigators were able to determine the victim had been shot twice with a .38 caliber revolver, once in the head and once in the chest. They also found that the body had been drained of blood and methodically dismembered. A composite sketch released to the public was quickly recognized by the wife of one of Bill McGuire's Navy friends. The remains belonged to William McGuire, a 39-year-old computer analyst and adjunct professor living in Woodbridge, New Jersey. Bill McGuire had vanished a week before the first suitcase surfaced, on April 28, 2004. That day should have been a celebratory one for the McGuire family. Bill and his wife, Melanie, a fertility nurse, had just closed on a $450,000 home in Warren County, New Jersey. They were preparing to move their 2 young sons out of their cramped apartment and into the house they had spent years planning for. According to Melanie, the day ended not in celebration, but in violence. She claimed that shortly after returning home from the closing, she and Bill got into an altercation over a laundry dryer sheet. Melanie told police that Bill slapped her, shoved a dryer cloth into her mouth, and pinned her against a doorframe. Fearing for her safety and that of her children, she locked herself in the bathroom with their toddler. She said Bill packed a bag, threatened to take the children, and stormed out of the apartment. She claimed she never saw him again. When Bill failed to show up for work or contact his family in the following days, Melanie did not immediately file a missing person report. She told friends and family that his behavior was not unusual for a man prone to angry outbursts. Instead, on April 30, she filed for a restraining order, citing the physical altercation. 2 days later, she contacted a divorce attorney. It was not until 3 weeks later, on May 21, after Virginia police had identified the body parts found in the suitcases, that Melanie filed for divorce. The contrast between Melanie's behavior and the gravity of the situation caught the attention of Detective Ray Pickell of the Virginia Beach Police Department. When he informed Melanie of her husband's death, he noted a disturbing lack of genuine emotion. She made expressions like she was crying, Pickell observed, but she never had a tear in her eye. To the veteran detective, her grief seemed theatrical. The investigation quickly pivoted from identifying a victim to finding a killer. The evidence pointed north, back to New Jersey. While there was no blood, no murder weapon, and no obvious crime scene in the McGuire apartment, a series of bizarre clues began to surface that painted a picture of calculated planning. Forensic technicians found a medical blanket wrapped around Bill's torso inside one of the suitcases. The blanket matched those used exclusively at the fertility clinic where Melanie worked. Then, investigators uncovered a trail of digital footprints. On the family computer, someone had conducted a series of disturbing internet searches in the weeks leading up to Bill's disappearance. The queries included undetectable poisons, how to commit murder, fatal insulin doses, how to find chloroform, and state gun laws in Pennsylvania. The gun searches proved particularly fruitful. Melanie had no criminal record, but her husband did. Bill had a felony conviction related to a bad driving record, which legally prohibited him from purchasing a firearm. Investigators discovered that just 2 days before Bill went missing, on April 26, Melanie drove to a gun shop in Easton, Pennsylvania, and bought a .38 caliber Taurus revolver, the same caliber used to kill Bill. When questioned about the purchase, Melanie claimed Bill had asked her to buy the gun for his protection because he was in trouble and unable to buy one himself. She maintained she had no idea how he had obtained the weapon later used in his murder. However, the murder weapon was never recovered, and ballistics tests could not definitively link the gun she bought to the bullets found in Bill's body, though they matched the caliber. As the investigation deepened, Melanie's narrative of a troubled marriage began to fray. She suggested her husband had been killed by dangerous individuals tied to a secret gambling addiction. She told police Bill visited Atlantic City casinos and owed money to the wrong people. To support this theory, she directed investigators to look for his car in Atlantic City. Police found the 1996 Nissan Maxima in a parking lot near a motel on May 5, the same day the first suitcase was discovered. But Melanie's own movements contradicted her story of a grieving wife waiting at home. Electronic toll records showed that her vehicle had traveled to Atlantic City late on the night of April 29, the day after Bill disappeared. 2 easy pass charges, totaling 90 cents, placed her on the Garden State Parkway heading south. Realizing the records contradicted her claims of being home, Melanie had called the toll authority in a panic, attempting to have the charges removed from her statement. "I panicked," she later admitted. "I absolutely tried to have those charges taken off because I feared that people would look and think what they ultimately ended up thinking." She eventually offered an explanation for the trip that defied belief. She claimed she drove to Atlantic City in the middle of the night to search for her husband. She told prosecutors that she spotted his car in a parking simply by chance while driving down the highway. In a fit of passive spite, she said she moved his car to a different spot to frustrate him. "It sounds beyond ridiculous sitting here saying it, and I acknowledge that," she told interviewers years later. "It's the truth." Prosecutor Patty Prezioso found the story impossible to accept. Atlantic City is a sprawling city with hundreds of parking lots and garages. The likelihood of stumbling upon one specific car in the dark was infinitesimal. Prezioso believed Melanie had staged the car's location to make it appear as though Bill had traveled there himself. The prosecution also suspected Melanie had an accomplice who helped her transport the body or the vehicles, though no accomplice was ever charged. Inside Bill's abandoned car, investigators found small particles of flesh on the floor mats. A forensic expert testified that these fragments, dubbed human sawdust, were consistent with flesh torn during the dismemberment process. Additionally, police found a bottle of the sedative chloral hydrate and 2 syringes in the car. Records showed that a prescription for chloral hydrate had been filled at a Walgreens pharmacy near the McGuire Children's Daycare on the morning of Bill's disappearance. The prescription was written on the pad of Dr. Bradley Miller, Melanie's boss at the fertility clinic. Dr. Miller later testified that the signature on the prescription was not his and appeared to be in Melanie's handwriting. Prosecutors alleged she had drugged Bill with the sedative, likely in a drink, to incapacitate him before shooting him. While toxicology reports on Bill's body were inconclusive regarding the sedative due to the decomposition caused by the water, the presence of the drug in his car tied it directly to Melanie. The most compelling motive for the prosecution emerged not from the forensic evidence, but from Melanie's personal life. Surveillance and wiretaps revealed that Melanie was having a 2-year affair with Dr. Bradley Miller. Miller was a married physician at the fertility clinic, and the two had exchanged hundreds of emails and explicit text messages. While they had discussed leaving their respective spouses to be together, neither had taken steps to do so prior to Bill's death. The prosecution argued that Melanie wanted to escape her marriage without the financial complications of a divorce. She had reportedly expressed concerns about the cost of splitting assets and losing custody of her children. Bill's life insurance and the new house provided financial incentives. By killing Bill and staging a disappearance or a murder linked to his gambling, she hoped to start a new life with Miller. "We believe she killed him to get him out of the way," Prezioso stated during the trial. The affair provided the emotional motive, while the gun, the drugs, and the internet searches provided the means. The defense, led by high-profile attorney Joe Tacopina, argued the case as entirely circumstantial. They emphasized the complete lack of physical evidence in the McGuire apartment. Police had pulled up floorboards, torn down sections of walls, and used luminol to detect blood, but found nothing. Impossible for that crime to have occurred in that apartment without there being a piece of evidence, Tacopina argued to the jury. He painted Bill as a man with a volatile temper and dangerous gambling debts, who likely ran afoul of loan sharks in Atlantic City. In June 2005, more than a year after the suitcases were found, Melanie McGuire was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, possession of a firearm for an unlawful purpose, and perjury regarding her testimony for the restraining order. The trial began in March 2007 in New Brunswick, New Jersey. The courtroom was packed and the proceedings gathered national media attention. The prosecution methodically laid out their timeline, presenting the jury with the suitcases, the gun purchase records, and the transcript of the chilling internet searches. They called Dr. Bradley Miller to the stand, where he admitted to the affair but denied any involvement in the murder. Perhaps the most damaging testimony came from Jim Finn, an old friend of Melanie's from nursing school. Unknown to Melanie, Finn had agreed to cooperate with the prosecution and wear a wire. In recorded conversations conversations played for the court, Melanie could be heard discussing the case, never confessing, but revealing a deep concern about the evidence against her. She asked Finn if he thought the police could link the gun to the bullets and complained about the surveillance. Tacopina aggressively cross-examined Finn, suggesting he had betrayed his friend because he was secretly in love with her and jealous of her relationship with Dr. Miller. You felt betrayed when you found out that the woman you were madly in love with was having an affair with a doctor that she worked with, correct? Tacopina asked. Finn admitted that was true. The defense also highlighted the unreliability of the forensic evidence. They pointed out that the bullets found in Bill had 6 lands and grooves, markings from the barrel of a gun, while the gun Melanie bought, according to the manufacturer's website, had 5. They argued that the prosecution had failed to prove the murder weapon was ever found. Despite the lack of a confession or a definitive crime scene, the sheer volume of circumstantial evidence weighed heavily on the jury. After 13 hours of deliberation over 2 days, they found Melanie McGuire guilty on all counts of murder, desecration of human remains, and unlawful possession of a weapon. She was found not guilty on several counts related to tampering with evidence and possessing medication without a prescription, but the core conviction stood. The verdict marked the end of the trial, but not the end of the story. Melanie McGuire was sentenced to life in prison, ensuring she would spend the rest of her days behind bars. Yet, even as the judge imposed the maximum sentence, she maintained her stoic denial. "I can't make anybody believe who's convinced that I've done this that I didn't," she said. "All I can continue to do is to tell the truth." Following the guilty verdict, Melanie McGuire's life transformed from that of a suburban mother to a state inmate designated as prisoner. She entered the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women in Clinton, New Jersey, in 2007 to begin a life sentence. The facility, the state's only women's prison, became her new reality. While the headlines faded, McGuire worked to carve out a niche within the prison walls, adopting her maiden name, Melanie Slate, for her institutional records. Behind bars, McGuire maintained a relatively low profile. She was not a disciplinary problem and avoided the infractions that plague many long-term inmates. In 2023, she was commended for remaining charge-free for a significant period. She immersed herself in the prison's educational and reform programs, co-running a meditation group and tutoring other prisoners in GED and ESL classes. She also joined an advisory group for prison reform, contributing to the internal dialogue about conditions at Edna Mahan during a period when the facility faced scrutiny over reports of staff sexual abuse. McGuire found her most distinct voice through writing. She became a regular contributor to the prison newsletter, Perceptions Reimagined, penning health advice columns and personal essays. Her writing revealed a woman grappling with the loss of her freedom and her family. In a 2024 essay titled "What Unites Us All," she wrote poignantly about her children. "I have no contact with or knowledge of my sons. I mourn their loss like a death while watching it continues to crush my family even after all this time." The custody of her 2 sons had been awarded to Bill's sister, Cindy Ligosh, shortly after McGuire's conviction. The court severed McGuire's parental rights, and as of the latest reports, she has had no contact with the boys since they were young children. Her primary motivation, as stated in her writings and interviews, became a desperate race to secure release before her elderly parents pass away. "Now, my goal, freedom, is a desperate race to get home and care for my parents before they die," she wrote. Legally, however, the walls remained closed. McGuire's legal team filed numerous appeals, but the New Jersey judicial system consistently upheld the conviction. In 2011, an appellate court affirmed the verdict, and in 2017, the Supreme Court declined to hear her case. Her lawyers argued that the trial court had erred by refusing to allow the defense to fully examine certain computer evidence, but these arguments failed to sway higher courts. She is not eligible for parole until May 2073, a date that effectively ensures she will die in prison. Yet, the narrative of the Suitcase Killer experienced resurgence in 2020, fueled by a new wave of media scrutiny and a popular true crime podcast. Direct Appeal, hosted by Fairleigh Dickinson University criminology professors Megan Sachs and Amy Schlossberg. They revisited the evidence and suggested that McGuire may have been wrongfully convicted. The podcast gave McGuire a platform to proclaim her innocence to a new generation of listeners, culminating in a televised interview with ABC News' Amy Robach on 2020. "After all these years, I still feel hurt. I still feel bothered. Like, how could somebody think that I did that?" McGuire asked during the interview. She stuck to her original account of the dryer sheet fight and Bill's subsequent disappearance, painting herself as a convenient suspect for a town horrified by a brutal crime. The podcast hosts and McGuire's advocates highlighted significant inconsistencies in the forensic evidence that had not been fully explored during the trial. A major point of contention was the murder weapon. McGuire purchased a .38 caliber revolver, but the bullets recovered from Bill's body had 6 lands and grooves, spiral markings inside the gun barrel. According to McGuire, the manufacturer's specifications for the gun she bought stated it had 5 lands and grooves. No one plugged the serial number of my gun into a website to find out what the specifications were, she argued. The bullets that came out of my husband had 6 lands and grooves. Prosecutor Patty Prezioso dismissed this discrepancy as a simple error on the gun manufacturer's website, insisting that ballistic experts, not web pages, provided the trial evidence. Yet the ambiguity provided ammunition for those doubting the verdict. The human sawdust, the tiny fragments of flesh found in Bill's car, also faced renewed skepticism. The prosecution argued that McGuire tracked these particles from the dismemberment site to the car. However, the lack of blood or any other biological evidence in the McGuire apartment made this theory difficult for some experts to accept. Saxon Schlossberg questioned the feasibility of dismembering a 200-pound man in a small apartment without leaving a single trace of blood or bone chips, despite police tearing up floorboards and cutting into walls. "I don't know how you would dismember a body and effectively clean that up," McGuire said. Her defenders argued that if the crime didn't happen in the apartment and McGuire was home with her children all night, the physical timeline collapsed. Furthermore, the podcast challenged the link between the trash bags found in the suitcase and those in the McGuire home. A state expert had testified they were chemically identical, but defense experts claimed the testing was insufficient to prove a definitive match. They also pointed to unexplained animal hairs found on the body that could not be linked to any pet owned by the McGuire family, suggesting the body may have been in contact with animals or environments unknown to the investigators. Despite these doubts, the prosecution's theory of a calculated murder remained potent. Prezioso stood by the conviction, arguing that the total weight of the evidence, the gun purchased days before the death, the forged prescription for sedatives, the affair, the lies about the car in Atlantic City, and the computer searches, created a mosaic of guilt that no amount of forensic nitpicking could dismantle. She planned for her husband to disappear, and disappear he did, Prezioso had told the jury. For McGuire, the battle is now fought in the court of public opinion as much as the legal system. She continues to write and advocate for her case, urging her now-adult sons to look beyond the headlines. Make up your mind. Don't accept what you're just being told on the surface. Dig. These documents exist. This stuff exists. It's out there, she told 2020. The case of Melanie McGuire remains a polarizing entry in the annals of true crime. To the state of New Jersey and the family of William McGuire, she is a cold-blooded killer who shot her husband in cold blood, sawed his body apart, and cast him into the Chesapeake Bay to pursue a life with a lover. To her supporters, she is a victim of a flawed justice system, convicted on circumstantial evidence and a narrative that fit a prosecutor's needs, but not the physical facts. As she approaches her 20th year behind bars, the suitcases have long since been destroyed, and the gun has never been found. Bill McGuire's resting place is known, but the truth of what happened in that Woodbridge apartment in the spring of 2004 remains contested, locked away between the conflicting accounts of a convicted murderer and the state that put her there. Alright, that's all I've got for you today. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Until then, goodbye and good night.